Some sports cars were so fast, so advanced, and so ahead of their time that they shocked the world and even made Ferrari nervous. These weren't the household names everyone remembers, but the hidden rockets, the rare experiments, and the underdog machines that could outrun Maranello's finest. Sleek bodies, powerful engines, and performance figures that made jaws drop, yet somehow history forgot them. Today, we bring back the 12 forgotten sports cars that made the Ferrari look slow. Incredible machines that proved speed doesn't always wear a prancing horse badge. Stick around till the end, and don't forget to subscribe. The 1967 Marcos GT 3.0 is one of those rare cars that, when you bring it up in conversation, even among seasoned classic car enthusiasts, you'll often get either a puzzled look or an admiring smile from the few who know the legend. Built in England by the tiny company Marcos Engineering, it was a machine born not from the corporate might of Detroit or Maranello, but from the obsessive tinkering of engineers who believed in lightness, aerodynamics, and ingenuity above brute force. Unlike the mass-produced sports cars of the 1960s, the Marcos was unapologetically eccentric. Its foundation was not steel or aluminum like its contemporaries, but wood. Yes, an actual laminated marine plywood chassis. It was an old-world material pressed into a new-world shape, giving the car rigidity and featherweight construction that turned every horsepower into meaningful speed. To outsiders, this might sound fragile or laughable, but those who drove one quickly learned that the Marcos GT 3.0 was no novelty. It was a scalpel on wheels. At the heart of the 1967 Marcos GT 3.0 sat Ford power, usually the Essex 3.0-liter V6 in its base form, but many buyers opted for larger Ford small-block V8s, especially the 289 and 302, creating a startling blend of British chassis finesse with American muscle. The V6 cars were already deceptively quick, exploiting the Marcos's low weight and slipper-like aerodynamics to outpace machines with far greater displacement. But when a V8 was fitted, the little British oddball became something of a monster, capable of running with contemporary Ferraris, Maseratis, and Porsches for a fraction of the cost. A well-tuned Marcos V8 was a true giant killer, a car that could humble exotics on both track and open road. Period road testers were often shocked by its sheer performance, describing the sensation as stepping into a sports car that looked delicate but behaved like a prize fighter. The looks were as striking as its engineering, with its impossibly low stance, long snout, covered headlights, and swooping fastback tail. The Marcos GT had the kind of shape that only a small manufacturer could dare build. It was unapologetically low to the ground, so low that drivers often remarked you could look directly into the hubcaps of passing trucks. Getting in and out was an exercise in contortion, and the seating position had you practically lying down, feet stretched far ahead in racing car fashion. For some, this made the Marcos feel exotic and futuristic. For others, it was downright uncomfortable. But once you were strapped in, with the small diameter steering wheel in your hands and the Ford engine snarling inches ahead, comfort no longer mattered. The Marcos felt alive, twitchy at low speeds, precise and razor-sharp once the pace increased. Yet despite its brilliance, the 1967 Marcos GT 3.0 never became a household name. Production was minuscule, with only a few hundred cars trickling out of the factory in the late 1960s. The company's limited resources meant quality was often inconsistent, and its eccentricities scared away mainstream buyers. Dealers struggled to sell a wooden chassis sports car in an era when steel monocoques were becoming the norm, and by the early 1970s, Marcos collapsed into obscurity. Owners were left with cars that few mechanics wanted to touch, leading many to disappear into barns or scrapyards. Those that survived often became the prized possessions of enthusiasts who appreciated just how special they were. One such owner in the 1980s quipped, "It was like owning a Ferrari, only with English wiring and the smell of varnish in the cabin." Today, the Marcos GT 3.0 is a ghost from a parallel universe of automotive history, a car that represented everything brilliant about small-scale British engineering: daring,
unconventional, and utterly uncompromising. Survivors are rare, cherished by collectors who delight in the car's mix of lightweight design, exotic styling, and Ford-sourced grunt. On the vintage racing circuit, a well-prepared Marcos remains a menace, capable of nipping at the heels of cars worth 10 times its value. To drive one is to experience an alternate version of the 1960s sports car era, where wood, not steel, formed the bones of performance, and where ambition far outweighed the size of the company that built it. Would you like me to expand this into a much longer, dramatic story that goes deeper into Marcos's origins, its bizarre wooden chassis design, racing exploits, period reviews, and detailed owner anecdotes, almost like a full historical documentary write-up?
The 1974 Bricklin SV1, in its earliest prototype V8 form, is one of those tantalizing what-ifs in the long history of failed American dream cars. A machine that in its embryonic stage seemed destined to shake the exotic car world, but instead fell victim to compromises, poor management, and the realities of production. Before it became the punchline it is remembered as today, with wheezing AMC V8s, laughably slow performance, and build quality so poor that owners joked the cars started falling apart before they even left the dealership, the Bricklin was conceived as something bold, something visionary. Malcolm Bricklin, the same eccentric entrepreneur who had brought Subaru to the United States in the late 1960s, wanted to craft a car that fused the glamour of a European exotic with the brute strength of American muscle. His original intention was not to create the underpowered plastic curiosity that trickled onto showroom floors in 1974, but a full-blooded American Ferrari, complete with gull-wing doors, radical safety features, and a muscular V8 roar. The early prototypes were the purest expression of that dream. Instead of AMC's 220 horsepower 360 or later the smothered Ford 351 Windsor, the initial SV1 mules carried potent V8s that turned the featherweight fiberglass and acrylic-bodied car into something genuinely menacing. With the right Ford or Chrysler small block tuned into them, those prototypes could sprint from 0 to 60 in well under 7 seconds, territory that in the early 1970s put it toe-to-toe with the Corvette and even nipping at the heels of European exotics like the Lamborghini Urraco or Maserati Merak. Test drivers and insiders whispered that these early cars felt properly fast, their long hoods and rakish wedge lines matched by real performance. Onlookers were stunned when the gull-wing doors arched open, giving the Bricklin a futuristic presence that seemed imported straight out of an auto show dreamland. Malcolm Bricklin himself was known to gush about the prototypes, calling them proof that America could build a car that was both safe and fast, stylish and attainable. Safety was his marketing hook. The car's name literally stood for Safety Vehicle 1, with integrated roll cage, side impact protection, and bumpers designed to absorb impact. But the real secret of the dream lay under the hood. Those prototypes had the heart of a proper muscle car, and paired with the wedge-shaped body and gull-wing doors, they truly could have redefined America's place in the performance car world. Sadly, the dream collapsed almost immediately when the car moved toward production. Funding shortfalls, government involvement in New Brunswick, Canada, and Bricklin's own overly ambitious timelines forced compromises. The lightweight wooden prototype chassis gave way to heavier steel structures. The tuned V8s were abandoned in favor of whatever off-the-shelf engines the fledgling company could secure cheaply and in bulk. AMC stepped in with its 360, which on paper was respectable, but by 1974 standards and with emissions gear tacked on, felt lethargic in the heavy SV1. Later, Ford's 351 Windsor replaced it, but even that engine was strangled by regulations, leaving performance that was a pale shadow of the fire-breathing prototypes. The result was a car that looked every bit the rival to a Ferrari or de Tomaso Pantera, but moved like a smothered station wagon. For those who were lucky enough to witness or even drive the early V8 prototypes, the disappointment was immense.
One engineer who worked on the program later lamented, "We had a car that could have shocked the world. It had the doors, the stance, the speed, the drama, and then we choked it to death before anyone could see what it could really do." Enthusiasts who have studied Bricklin's papers and surviving prototype notes often speculate on what might have been if the company had stuck to its guns, perhaps aligning with Ford or Chrysler to secure real high-performance V8s in volume. Instead, the Bricklin joined the long list of automotive cautionary tales: too much vision, too little execution, and no money to hold it all together. In 2025, the legend of the V8 prototypes lingers as a fascinating ghost of American car history. The production Bricklin SV1 is mostly remembered as a slow, unreliable oddity, infamous for its hydraulic gull-wing doors that often failed mid-operation and left owners trapped in parking lots. But the prototypes remind us that it didn't have to be that way. In another universe, the 1974 Bricklin SV1 could have been the affordable American exotic that finally gave Ferrari something to worry about. A bold wedge of fiberglass and Detroit horsepower with the audacity to open its doors skyward. Instead, all that survives is the dream of what could have been, whispered among collectors and engineers like a story of a comet that burned bright for a moment before vanishing forever.
The 1967 Sunbeam Tiger Mark II stands as one of the most tantalizing almosts of the 1960s performance era. A car that had all the ingredients of a legend, but was denied its rightful place in history by corporate politics and circumstance. While everyone knows Carroll Shelby's name because of the Cobra and the Mustang GT 350, the Tiger was his other great transatlantic experiment. A roadster that took the modest, rather ordinary Sunbeam Alpine and transformed it into a pocket rocket capable of humiliating cars far more expensive and prestigious. By the time the Mark II rolled onto the scene, it had evolved into something truly formidable. A compact British body wrapped around Ford's legendary 289 cubic inch V8, delivering power and performance that could rival Ferraris and Maseratis of the day at half the cost. The Tiger began life in 1964 when the Roots Group, Sunbeam's parent company, realized that their Alpine was pretty but lacked any real performance credentials. Enter Carroll Shelby, already in the business of shoving American V8s into small European bodies. For Shelby, it was almost second nature. Take a light, nimble British chassis and give it the brute force of a Ford V8. With Ford eager to promote its small blocks, the marriage was quickly arranged, and the first Tigers rolled out with 260 cubic inch Ford V8s. They were fast, affordable, and charmingly unassuming. But it was the Mark II in 1967 that perfected the formula. The Mark II got the 289 V8, the same displacement that powered the Shelby GT 350 and countless street Mustangs, and in the Tiger's small, sub-2,600-pound body, the result was explosive. Period testers reported 0 to 60 times in the mid-7-second range, some even quicker with tuned versions, and top speeds north of 120 miles per hour. That meant a Sunbeam, a car many dismissed as a pleasant touring roadster, could suddenly keep pace with Ferraris like the 275 GTS or Maseratis of the era at half the cost. Imagine the scene. A wealthy European sports car driver, smug in his expensive Italian machine, suddenly left dumbfounded as a humble little British convertible, complete with wood trim and a badge few took seriously, blew past him on the highway with Detroit thunder under the hood. That was the Tiger's real charm, the ability to combine civility and elegance with shocking, almost impolite performance. But the Mark II was rare almost from the start. Only about 536 were built, and for reasons that had nothing to do with demand or desirability. Chrysler had acquired the Roots Group. And here was the problem. Chrysler executives had no interest in selling a car powered by a competitor's engine. The irony was bitter. Chrysler simply had no suitable small V8 that could fit under the Tiger's low hood without extensive redesign. So rather than adapt, they simply killed the car.
By 1967, just as the Tiger Mark II was hitting its stride, it was already a dead end. Production ceased abruptly, leaving the Mark II not only the fastest and most developed Tiger, but also the rarest and most coveted today. For owners, the Tiger Mark II was almost mythical. Many remember how it felt like having a Cobra's soul in a more usable package. One longtime driver once said, "It was the kind of car that never got taken seriously until you floored it." The look on people's faces when that little Sunbeam walked away from their Corvette was priceless. The Mark II also retained a touch of refinement compared to its Shelby cousins. It had a more finished interior than the Cobra and was a little more civilized on long drives, yet still had the ability to shred tires with a stab of the throttle. By modern standards, the Tiger Mark II is a collector's dream, rare, beautiful, and historically fascinating. It represents a road not taken, a world in which Chrysler might have embraced the Ford-powered partnership and allowed the car to flourish. Instead, it became a casualty of corporate ego, one of the most tragic examples of how boardroom politics can kill a brilliant machine. Today, the Mark II is one of those cars that makes enthusiasts sigh wistfully. It wasn't just fast. It was one of the greatest giant killers of its time. A little British roadster with a big American heart, denied the chance to become the legend it deserved to be. Would you like me to expand this even further? Weaving in Shelby's personal involvement, comparisons to the Cobra, anecdotes from road tests in the 60s, and the inside story of how Chrysler executives buried it, almost like a dramatic historical feature on the Tiger Mark II's short but spectacular life?
The 1970 Monteverdi High 450 SS is one of those almost mythical machines that feels like it was dreamt up during a feverish night in Modena. Only it didn't come from Ferrari or Lamborghini. It came from a quiet Swiss industrialist named Peter Monteverdi, a man with audacity and ambition who wanted to prove that Switzerland, a country better known for watches and neutrality, could build a supercar to shame Italy's best. And for one dazzling moment, he nearly did. The High 450 SS was a startling vision, a wedge-shaped, low-slung purple missile of a car with gull-wing ambitions and an American heart beating furiously beneath its fiberglass skin. That heart, crucially, wasn't just any engine. It was Chrysler's legendary 426 Hemi, the same brute that dominated NASCAR and drag strips across America. To imagine that beast stuffed into a delicate mid-engine chassis built for European finesse was to imagine chaos, brilliance, and danger all in equal measure. The name said it all. High meant shark in German, and 450 referred to the horsepower rating of the engine. This was not a coy sports car. This was a predator. In an era when Ferrari's V12s boasted power in the high 300s and Lamborghini's Miura was considered the uncontested exotic king with its transverse V12, Monteverdi's High came crashing onto the stage like a thunderclap. With its 426 Hemi pumping out 450 horsepower, the High promised acceleration that bordered on savage. Contemporary estimates put 0 to 60 miles per hour under 5 seconds, with a top speed approaching 180 miles per hour. Numbers that would have put it among the fastest cars on Earth in 1970. The design matched the fury of its internals. It wore a sharp, wedge-shaped body penned by Pietro Frua, the Italian stylist who understood how to combine menace with elegance. Painted in a vivid, almost garish purple, the High 450 SS looked like no Swiss product ever should. It was flashy, aggressive, and confident. Its wide stance, flared arches, and purposeful vents made it clear this was no gentleman's grand tour, but a machine designed to strike fear in Maranello and Sant'Agata alike. And yet, inside, Monteverdi insisted on Swiss refinement. Plush leather, wood trim, and a cockpit that balanced luxury with menace. It was a supercar for the eccentric banker who wanted both speed and civility, a kind of Swiss answer to the Miura. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone.
Monteverdi's dreams of mass-producing the High never materialized. The car was unveiled at the 1970 Geneva Motor Show to astonishment and praise, but the practical realities of building a mid-engine Hemi-powered exotic proved insurmountable. Heat management, transmission durability, and the sheer insanity of trying to tame a NASCAR-bred engine in a road-going car all conspired against it. Worse, Monteverdi simply lacked the resources of Ferrari or Lamborghini. Production plans were discussed, orders supposedly whispered about, but in the end, only 2 examples of the High 450 SS were ever built. One became a showpiece, the other a prototype, and then the shark quietly slipped back beneath the waters of obscurity. For those who saw it in the flesh, the High was unforgettable. Enthusiasts in Geneva remembered the way it looked like it had been dropped from another planet. One journalist quipped that the High has the menace of a Miura, but with the heart of a drag racer. Owners, or rather caretakers, since only 2 ever existed, described it as exhilarating but terrifying. The Hemi's brute torque overwhelmed the chassis, and while the car could sprint like a demon in a straight line, taming it in corners required a surgeon's hands and nerves of steel. It was, in a way, too much car for its own good, a Swiss experiment in excess that dared to challenge the Italians with raw American muscle. Today, the Monteverdi High 450 SS is little more than a footnote, a car whispered about among hardcore enthusiasts and occasionally glimpsed at rare concours events. To most people, Monteverdi itself is a forgotten mark, let alone this purple monster. Yet, for those who care about the lost roads of automotive history, the High stands as one of the great what-if cars. What if Monteverdi had the resources to refine it? What if a dozen or more had been built and unleashed on Europe's highways, embarrassing Miuras and Daytonas? Instead, the High exists as a tantalizing relic, a shark that swam too briefly, leaving only ripples in the water, and a legend that refuses to fully die. Would you like me to expand this even further into a near book-length profile, weaving in Peter Monteverdi's backstory, the engineering struggles of putting a Hemi in a mid-engine layout, period reactions from Geneva, and the strange afterlife of the 2 surviving cars, almost like a dramatic biography of the High 450 SS?
The 1962 Apollo GT is one of those rare and utterly fascinating cars that most people today have never heard of, yet it deserves a spotlight alongside the most storied Italian exotics of its era. Born in California, it was a marriage of American muscle and Italian artistry, a handcrafted, low-slung GT that offered the aesthetic and performance thrill of a Ferrari, yet carried a price tag far lower than anything rolling out of Maranello. Only about 90 Apollo GTs were ever built, making it a near mythical presence on roads and at car shows, a fleeting ghost of a time when small, ambitious manufacturers dared to take on the giants of Europe. The bodywork, penned by renowned Italian designer Franco Scaglione and executed by Intermeccanica, was pure sculptural elegance. Every line of the Apollo GT suggested speed, from its elongated hood and sharply tapered nose to the subtle rear fender bulges that hinted at power contained beneath the skin. Unlike many American sports cars of the era, which relied heavily on chrome and flamboyance, the Apollo GT's design was refined, purposeful, and almost European in its understatement. Observers often remarked that it looked like it had been stolen from the roads of Modena or Turin, rather than born in a California workshop. Beneath this elegant skin, however, was the heart of American practicality. Buick's robust aluminum and iron V8s, typically 215 or 300 cubic inches depending on the customer's order. These engines offered a remarkable combination of reliability, smooth power delivery, and a willingness to rev that few European engines could match without frequent servicing. While a Ferrari might have required obsessive maintenance, the Apollo GT could be driven hard day after day, offering owners the thrill of exotic styling with far less worry about breakdowns or part scarcity. With a carefully balanced weight-to-power ratio, the Apollo GT could reach 150+ miles per hour, with acceleration brisk enough to embarrass many European competitors at a fraction of the cost. For a small shop car, this was nothing short of miraculous.
Handling was another area where the Apollo GT truly shone. Its lightweight, handcrafted chassis, tuned by European engineers, provided crisp, communicative steering, minimal body roll, and a sense of composure that made drivers feel like they were piloting a much more expensive car. The suspension struck a rare balance for the time, providing enough comfort for road trips while remaining taut enough for spirited drives on winding roads or early racetracks. Owners from the era often recalled that, behind the wheel, the car felt much more planted and refined than American sports cars with similar power, giving them a taste of European precision in a domestic package. Despite all its virtues, the Apollo GT never achieved commercial success, and production numbers remained minuscule. The challenges of hand-building an exotic in small batches, coupled with the limited marketing reach and competition from both American and European manufacturers, meant that most Americans never encountered one. Today, the surviving cars are treasured by collectors for their rarity, engineering ingenuity, and the audacity of their concept, a California-built car with Italian elegance and American practicality that could legitimately compete with Ferraris on looks, speed, and reliability. The Apollo GT represents a fleeting moment in automotive history when a small, determined team dared to defy expectations, merge two worlds, and craft a car that was as beautiful as it was capable. It remains a testament to what could be achieved outside the industrial giants, a rare jewel that proves small shops with vision and a willingness to combine the best of American and European engineering could indeed embarrass Maranello, even if it was only in the imaginations of those lucky enough to drive or witness one. If you want, I can expand this into a much longer, story-driven piece with imagined test drives, contemporary press reactions, interviews with owners, and detailed comparisons to the Ferraris, Maseratis, and Lamborghinis of the early 1960s, making it read like a full historical epic about the Apollo GT. Do you want me to do that next?
The 1969 Iso Grifo 7 Litri is one of those incredible machines that seems almost like a fantasy today, the kind of car you dream up if you were a rebellious engineer in the late 1960s with access to both Italian design studios and American big block engines. On the outside, it was everything a proper European Grand Tourer should be: long, low, impossibly sleek, with sharp Bertone styling that oozed understated menace. But under the hood lurked something entirely different from the usual high-strung Italian V12. Iso had gone to Chevrolet and stuffed in a monstrous 7-liter, 427 cubic inch big block Corvette engine. The result was the Iso Grifo 7 Litri, a car that could cruise serenely at 140 miles per hour and, when provoked, blast past a Ferrari Daytona as if it were standing still. Iso itself was a curious company. Before the Grifo, they weren't even known for exotic cars. Renzo Revolta's company had made refrigerators, scooters, and the little bubble car Isetta, which BMW famously licensed. By the early 1960s, Revolta wanted something more glamorous, and he turned to Giotto Bizzarrini, the same genius engineer who helped develop Ferrari's legendary 250 GTO before being forced out after clashing with Enzo Ferrari. Bizzarini's idea was simple but brilliant. Use dependable, inexpensive American V8s inside elegant Italian bodies. No finicky carburetors, no impossible-to-find spare parts, just raw torque and reliability wrapped in a European suit. The Grifo was the finest expression of that philosophy. Styled by Giorgetto Giugiaro during his Bertone years, it looked like a sculpture in motion, all razor-sharp lines and perfect proportions. Early Grifos used Chevrolet's small block 327 V8, but in 1968, Iso decided to up the ante and offer the 7 Litri version. This meant dropping in Chevy's L71 427, rated at 435 horsepower, though in reality, many of these engines put out closer to 500. This was an engine built for drag strips and big American muscle cars, suddenly living inside a hand-built Italian GT, weighing far less than a Corvette. The performance figures were staggering for the time. 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds and a top speed north of 170 miles per hour,
making it one of the fastest road cars in the world in 1969. And yet, unlike many of its rivals, the Grifo wasn't just fast, it was comfortable. Iso prided itself on building true Grand Tours. The interior was luxurious, with leather seats, proper ergonomics, and a refinement you didn't often find in Italian sports cars of the day. The Grifo could be driven across Europe without punishing its driver, something owners of temperamental Ferraris or Maseratis couldn't always say. One owner in period put it perfectly: "My Grifo never once left me stranded. My friend's Ferrari spent more time in the shop than on the road." Collectors often call the Grifo a Ferrari killer, and that wasn't just marketing talk. Road tests in Europe showed it running neck and neck with Ferraris and Lamborghinis, sometimes beating them outright, particularly in top speed runs. And while a Ferrari's V12 howled at high revs, the Grifo's American V8 delivered an entirely different thrill, a bottomless well of torque that shoved you into the seat from idle all the way to redline. That duality, Italian style, American muscle, made it unlike anything else on the road. But like so many boutique brands, Iso's ambitions eventually outpaced their finances. Building cars by hand in small numbers was expensive, and even with American power plants, the Grifo cost as much as a Ferrari or Lamborghini. In total, fewer than 400 Grifos were built, and only a fraction of those were the 7 Litri big block models. By the mid-1970s, Iso collapsed under financial strain, leaving the Grifo as a tantalizing reminder of what might have been. Today, the Iso Grifo 7 Litri is a blue-chip collectible, though still not as widely known as its Italian rivals. Those lucky enough to drive one rave about its balance of speed and civility. "It was the only car I ever owned that could outdrag a Daytona on Sunday and take my wife to dinner on Monday without complaint," recalled one former owner. That kind of versatility, combined with its rarity, makes the Grifo one of the greatest forgotten supercars of its era. Would you like me to expand even further into the story of Iso, tracing how the same company that built the Isetta ended up building a 170-mile-per-hour Ferrari rival, and how the Grifo's legacy compares to cars like the Bizzarrini 5300 GT and the Tomaso Pantera?
The 1963 Studebaker Avanti R3 is one of those almost mythical American cars that continues to baffle and impress automotive historians alike. At a time when most American cars were bloated, heavy, and timid, the Avanti R3 was a revelation. Sleek, aerodynamic, and supremely fast, it represented what Studebaker could achieve when ambition, engineering genius, and daring design collided. Unlike the company's more pedestrian models, the R3 was the work of visionary designer Raymond Loewy and engineer Bob Paxton, who together created an American sports car that didn't just flirt with European performance, it openly challenged it. The body of the Avanti was a masterpiece of aerodynamics, something almost unheard of in the early 1960s United States. The long, tapering nose, low-slung roofline, and dramatically curved rear end minimized drag and made the car look impossibly fast even when standing still. The interior, though minimalist, was carefully crafted with driver-focused ergonomics and styling cues that hinted at European sophistication without sacrificing the comfort Studebaker's buyers expected. Every detail of the R3 suggested motion and purpose. It was a car designed to command respect and attention on both the highway and the racetrack. Under this striking body, the true magic was in Paxton's supercharged V8. With the R3's specially tuned engine, the Avanti could exceed 170 miles per hour, putting it in direct competition with Ferraris, Maseratis, and Jaguars of the same era. In 1963 alone, the Avanti set 29 speed records at the Bonneville Salt Flats, demonstrating not just raw power, but remarkable engineering precision in aerodynamics, cooling, and drivetrain robustness. For a small American company like Studebaker, this was an extraordinary achievement, proof that they could innovate and compete on a global scale, even if their resources paled in comparison to Detroit's Big Three or Italy's famed Marques. The driving experience was reportedly exhilarating. Owners described a sense of controlled fury. The car could rocket down a straightaway, yet its handling, though unconventional, allowed for surprising agility in corners. The Paxton supercharger provided instantaneous boost, and the carefully balanced suspension prevented the car from feeling unstable despite its impressive top speeds. Mechanics today marvel at the engineering ingenuity that made a small Midwest manufacturer capable of creating a machine that combined aerodynamics, forced induction, and driver confidence so successfully. Sadly, the R3's brilliance came too late to save Studebaker. The company's financial instability and production constraints meant that only a handful of R3s were built, and the car never had the chance to cement its legacy in the marketplace. Collectors and enthusiasts now look back in awe at what could have been an American-designed, supercharged sports car that could outrun many of Europe's finest, yet was doomed by circumstance rather than capability. In hindsight, the Studebaker Avanti R3 is remembered not just for its numbers or records, but as a symbol of ambition and innovation in the face of adversity. It was a car that defied expectations, blended American horsepower with European sensibilities, and proved that even a small, struggling manufacturer could produce something extraordinary. Today, the R3 is a rare jewel, an artifact of what happens when vision exceeds resources, and a reminder that sometimes the fastest car isn't the one that survives in production, but the one that leaves a legend behind.
The 1971 Tomaso Pantera is one of those cars that perfectly embodies the restless spirit of the early 1970s, when Italian exotic styling and American horsepower were still affordable enough to be blended into something wild, raw, and uncompromising. It was born out of an unusual marriage between Alejandro de Tomaso, the Argentinian-born racing driver turned boutique car maker in Modena, and the Ford Motor Company, which was hungry for a halo sports car to bolster its image in the wake of the Mustang's success. What they came up with was the Pantera, a low, sharp, wedge-shaped missile with the looks of a Ferrari but the heart of a Detroit street brawler. By 1970, de Tomaso had already proven he could build interesting cars like the Mangusta, but those were limited, expensive, and plagued with quirks that kept them from reaching a wide audience. Ford saw an opportunity to create something exotic yet accessible. The deal was struck. De Tomaso would design and build the car in Italy, while Ford would supply engines, transmissions, and most importantly, its massive dealer network to actually sell the thing in America. The timing was perfect, as Ford had just introduced its high-performance 351 Cleveland V8, a motor known for its big port cylinder heads, impressive breathing, and rugged strength. Dropped into the mid-engine chassis of the new Pantera, it became a true monster. The Pantera styling, penned by Ghia's Tom Todarda, was dramatic even by Italian standards of the time. Long, sharp, and muscular with a low stance and a cockpit shoved forward, it looked like something from a futuristic racing paddock. The lines were angular but elegant, and the rear haunches flared just enough to signal that serious muscle lurked within. Unlike Ferraris of the same period, the Pantera didn't need to scream about pedigree. Its proportions alone made people stop in their tracks. On the road, the car was nothing short of brutal. The 351 Cleveland sat directly behind the driver, fed by a ZF 5-speed transaxle originally designed for racing use in cars like the GT40. This combination delivered around 330 horsepower in stock trim, but more importantly, it offered massive torque across the rev range. Where a Ferrari 365 GTBB required delicate rev management and constant gear changes, the Pantera could simply bury its right foot and surge forward on an endless wave of low-end grunt. In period, a stock Pantera could sprint to 60 miles per hour in around 5.5 seconds and push beyond 150 miles an hour, numbers that put it in the same league as the most expensive Italian exotics of the day at a fraction of the price. Owners loved this dual personality, exotic styling paired with mechanical simplicity. Unlike a Ferrari, which often required exotic parts and specialist mechanics, the Pantera could be serviced at your local Ford dealership. Spark plugs, belts, gaskets, all were off-the-shelf American parts. As one early owner remembered, I could pull into the Ford dealer on Monday, order a carb rebuild kit, and have the car back together by Wednesday. My buddy's Ferrari was in the shop for months waiting on a water pump. That practicality, combined with outrageous performance, made the Pantera unlike anything else on the market. But it wasn't perfect. Far from it. Early Pantera suffered from notoriously spotty quality control. Some cars arrived in America with misaligned panels, electrical gremlins, or overheating issues thanks to poorly routed cooling systems. Fit and finish varied wildly. The same car that could blow past a Ferrari on the highway might also have windows that refused to roll down or a clutch that burned out in traffic. Road testers of the day were both dazzled and frustrated. Car and Driver famously described the Pantera as half-exotic dream, half-baked nightmare. Still, when properly sorted, the Pantera was devastatingly quick, and tuners quickly discovered how much potential the 351 Cleveland held. With just a cam swap, carb tuning, and exhaust work, Panteras could easily reach 400 horsepower. More serious builds pushed well past 500, turning the car into a Ferrari assassin that cost half as much. On American highways in the early 1970s, nothing caused more shock than seeing a low-slung Italian wedge storm past and then hearing the unmistakable bellow of a Ford V8. The Pantera stayed in production far longer than most people realize, with various iterations built up into the 1990s. In America, sales tapered off after the mid-70s, when emissions regulations and rising insurance costs killed demand. But in Europe, the Pantera became a cult icon, constantly evolving with more power and wilder styling. By the time the last Pantera left the factory, it had become a legend among those who wanted something more aggressive and raw than a Porsche 911 and far less delicate than a Ferrari. Today, the Pantera has a cult following unlike almost any other exotic. Collectors prize them not only for their rarity, but for their dual character, the sophistication of Italian design paired with the raw simplicity of Ford muscle. Owners tend to describe them with a mix of pride and exasperation. As one lifelong Pantera driver put it, "It was the most exciting, most terrifying car I ever owned. Nothing I've driven since has given me the same thrill, even if I had to fix something on it every other weekend." Would you like me to expand next into the long saga of the Pantera's later years, like the outrageous GT5 and GT5S wide-body versions, and how the car kept evolving even after Ford pulled out? Or keep the focus squarely on the early 71 model that stormed into America as a Ferrari killer?
The 1969 AMX/3 is one of those cars that feels like an impossible fever dream, the kind of project you'd expect from Ferrari or Lamborghini, not from the most conservative and budget-conscious of Detroit's automakers. Yet for one brief moment in the late 1960s, American Motors Corporation, a company better known for Rambler sedans, quirky economy cars, and family wagons, shocked the world by unveiling a genuine mid-engine exotic designed to rival the titans of Modena and Sant'Agata. It wasn't a styling exercise or a pie-in-the-sky idea, it was real, it ran, and the press who tested it declared it every bit as serious as anything coming out of Italy at the time. The tragedy is that only 6 were ever built, and AMC's unlikely supercar dream died before it could reach production. The AMX/3 story began as AMC tried to bolster its image in the muscle car era. By 1968, the company had launched the AMX and Javelin, proving it could play in the performance arena, but AMC wanted something bolder, a statement car that would elevate its reputation overnight. Enter Giotto Bizzarrini, one of the great engineers of the Italian sports car world. Bizzarrini had helped shape Ferrari legends like the 250 GTO, developed Lamborghini's V12, and even created his own exotic machines under his name. He was contracted through Italian coach builders like Italdesign and BMW consultant connections to turn AMC's vague idea into reality. The result was stunning. A low-slung, wedge-shaped mid-engine coupe that looked ready to do a Lamura on the Autostrada.
Underneath that sleek Italian skin, AMC supplied its own muscle, the 390 cubic inch V8, a burly power plant known for its torque and ruggedness. Mounted amidships, it gave the AMX/3 an entirely different character from Ferrari's high-strung V12s or Lamborghini's wailing engines. Instead of needing to be revved to the stratosphere, the AMX/3 delivered effortless thrust with a deep American growl. Road testers were stunned. In trials at Monza, the prototype reached a verified 170 miles per hour, a number that put it directly into the supercar conversation with Ferrari's Daytona and Lamborghini's Miura. One journalist famously remarked that the car felt as if AMC had built a hammer wrapped in silk. Smooth when you wanted it, brutal when you demanded it. Even more impressive was its balance. Thanks to Bizzarrini's mid-engine chassis design, the AMX/3 handled with grace and precision rarely associated with American cars of the time. Where most Detroit muscle was nose-heavy and prone to understeer, this prototype danced through corners with poise. The European press, notoriously hard on American iron, actually praised it as one of the best-balanced mid-engine machines they had driven. For AMC, the publicity was priceless. The world was talking about the smallest Detroit automaker as if it were suddenly a competitor to Ferrari. Yet, despite its promise, the AMX/3 was doomed from the start. The late 1960s were a turbulent time. Safety regulations, insurance crackdowns, and looming emissions rules were beginning to choke the supercar market, and AMC simply didn't have the capital to gamble on such an expensive, risky project. Production costs for the AMX/3 were projected to be high sky, well beyond what AMC could realistically ask its customers to pay. The oil crisis was still a few years away, but already executives feared there was no future in $10,000 plus exotics. So, with the cold logic of accountants, AMC pulled the plug. Only 6 AMX/3s were completed, each slightly different as refinements were made. They passed quietly into private hands, becoming mysterious unicorns whispered about in collector circles. For decades, few people even believed they existed, and AMC itself seemed embarrassed to admit it had once dreamed so audaciously. But enthusiasts who encountered them never forgot. One former owner recalled, "It didn't feel like an AMC at all. It felt like a Miura with American lungs. People couldn't believe the badge on the back." Today, the AMX/3 stands as one of the great what-ifs of the muscle car and supercar eras. If AMC had somehow found a way to build even a few dozen, it could have changed the company's image forever, repositioning it from a quirky economy brand into a genuine performance player. Instead, the 6 survivors are cherished oddities, museum pieces that prove just how wild and daring the late 1960s really were. Would you like me to expand even deeper into the individual stories of the 6 surviving AMX/3s, where they ended up, who owned them, and how collectors view them now, or keep the story framed around the car's design and its tragic lost potential?
The 1965 Shelby Cobra 427 stands not merely as a car, but as an audacious, almost mythic statement in automotive history. A car so extreme, so unrelenting, that it reshaped the way the world thought about performance. While European exotics of the era were meticulous, elegant machines designed for precision and balance, the 427 was raw, visceral, and unapologetically American in its approach. A tiny British roadster's frame swollen with the brute force 7.0-liter Ford FE V8, creating an intoxicating cocktail of speed, power, and sheer menace. At roughly 2,300 pounds, the Cobra was almost absurdly light, and every pound it carried worked to amplify the ferocity of its massive engine. It was a car that demanded respect the instant the key turned, a mechanical predator capable of making even the most exotic Ferraris look like docile sports cars. Performance numbers only hint at its legendary status. With 0 to 60 times dipping under 4 seconds, figures that were practically science fiction in 1965, the Cobra didn't just accelerate, it lunged. Every press of the throttle sent the car forward with violent urgency, a reminder that in the world of 427 Cobras, hesitation was a liability. Top speeds approached 160 miles per hour in production trim, and tuned versions were capable of even more, rivaling European thoroughbreds that cost 3 times as much. The exhaust growl, a guttural roar that seemed almost alive, announced the Cobra's arrival long before its diminutive body appeared, commanding attention in a way that no quiet, elegant European could. The chassis, deceptively simple at first glance, was a marvel of engineering. Shelby's genius lay in pairing the enormous power plant with a lightweight, compact British frame to create a car that could corner with surprising precision. Steering was direct, brakes were strong for the time, and the suspension allowed the Cobra to dance through corners with a mix of agility and intimidation. Yet mastery of the car was not for the timid. Its power-to-weight ratio was terrifying, and unskilled drivers quickly discovered that a single misjudgment could result in a spin or a crash. Owning a 427 meant committing to a car that would test every ounce of driving ability, demanding respect at all times. Enthusiasts often describe a cocktail of exhilaration and fear, the adrenaline of high-speed maneuvers tempered by the knowledge that the car would not forgive mistakes. The cultural impact of the Cobra 427 cannot be overstated. Carroll Shelby's decision to pit the 427 against the elite of Europe, including Ferrari and Maserati, was a masterstroke of both marketing and audacity. On racetracks like Le Mans, Riverside, and Daytona, the Cobra's American muscle challenged the old-world notions of performance. Ferrari, accustomed to dominating on precision and engineering finesse, was blindsided by a car that relied on raw power and clever weight reduction. It is said that Enzo Ferrari, visibly frustrated after losing to Cobras in multiple events, refused to shake Shelby's hand at Le Mans, a rare public display of indignation. The 427 didn't just win races, it humiliated the establishment, proving that American engineering, when applied fearlessly, could compete at the highest levels of sports car performance. Owners' experiences cement the car's legendary status. One recalled taking his 427 to a twisty canyon road, expecting a casual drive, only to find the torque so overwhelming that every corner became a lesson in control and courage. Another remembered lining up against a contemporary Ferrari 275 GTB at a local strip, only to watch the Cobra leap forward and leave the Italian beauty struggling to keep pace. The Cobra was a car of extremes. It could be exhilarating, terrifying, beautiful, and brutal, all in a single heart-stopping moment. To drive a 427 was to dance on the edge, to experience the raw potential of American engineering combined with the finesse of British design. Yet the 427 was not without flaws, and these imperfections only add to its mystique. The aluminum-bodied Cobras could be temperamental. The suspension was simple compared to European rivals, and comfort was almost non-existent. Every design choice prioritized performance over practicality, creating a car that was as demanding as it was thrilling. But for those who understood its genius, these flaws were part of the allure. A 427 Cobra was not meant to be tamed. It was meant to dominate, to thrill, to leave an indelible impression on everyone who witnessed it in motion. Today, the 1965 Shelby Cobra 427 is revered as one of the most iconic performance cars ever created. Original examples fetch stratospheric sums, and replicas, while cheaper, still evoke the same awe and adrenaline. It embodies the very essence of the 1960s American muscle ethos, audacious, unrelenting, and fearless. Unlike many other cars of the era, it has transcended mere transportation, becoming a symbol of ambition, rebellion, and the triumph of raw engineering brilliance over convention. The 427 Cobra remains a benchmark by which all roadsters are measured, a car that defined an era and continues to inspire awe more than half a century later.
The 1966 Bizzarrini 5300 GT Strada. is one of those rare automotive marvels that perfectly straddles two worlds, the raw, unpolished power of American V8s and the exquisite aerodynamic artistry of Italian design. Giotto Bizzarrini, fresh from his tenure at Ferrari, took everything he had learned about high-performance engineering and aesthetics and poured it into this car, creating a machine that was as intellectually compelling as it was breathtaking to behold. Its sleek, low-slung body, sculpted by Ital design collaborators, seems to slice through the air even when standing still, with sharp fender lines, a purposeful nose, and a graceful fastback that makes the car look like it's perpetually accelerating. The styling was uncompromising, a statement of both elegance and menace, signaling that beneath this beautiful shell lurked something far more potent than its unassuming demeanor suggested. Bizzarrini's choice of the Chevrolet 327 small block V8 was both pragmatic and inspired. At a time when European engines often struggled to produce high power reliably, the 327 delivered robust, predictable output, allowing the 5300 GT Strada to reach top speeds of around 170 miles per hour, faster than the Ferrari 275 GTB it was frequently pitched against. Acceleration was brutal for the era. 0 to 60 times were in the low 6-second range, making it one of the fastest GTs on the planet. And yet, unlike many exotic cars of the mid-60s, the 5300 GT Strada offered a level of durability and maintainability rarely found in Ferrari or Maserati equivalents, thanks to its American heart. Mechanics could source parts for the engine with ease, and the pushrod V8 tolerated rougher treatment than the delicate European mills it competed with, giving the car a subtle practicality beneath its exotic veneer. Handling, too, was a revelation. Bizzarrini applied his racing expertise to the chassis, with a lightweight tubular steel frame and near-perfect weight distribution. The suspension, though simple by modern standards, was tuned for balance and responsiveness, giving the 5300 GT a confidence-inspiring feel at high speed. While some contemporaries felt twitchy or unpredictable on twisty roads, the Bizzarrini struck a near-perfect equilibrium between agility and high-speed stability. Drivers found it communicative. Every input, from steering to throttle modulation, translated into immediate feedback, giving a sense of connection that made the car feel alive rather than merely a machine. Yet despite its performance and styling, the 5300 GT Strada remained virtually invisible to the broader car-buying public. Production was limited to a few dozen units per year, making it rarer than almost any Ferrari it competed against. Its exotic looks did not guarantee sales, as the hybrid nature, American engine, Italian chassis, confused buyers accustomed to more conventional brands. Many cars ended up in private collections or hidden garages, quietly outpacing their more famous competitors, while their names faded from public memory. Hardcore collectors today speak of the 5300 GT with reverent awe, describing it as a car that could embarrass a Ferrari in both a straight line and on a twisty road, yet is still unknown to anyone who doesn't seek out automotive rarities. Inside, the 5300 GT Strada was a fusion of comfort and purpose. Leather-trimmed seats, a driver-focused dash, and simple but effective instrumentation reflected Bizzarrini's philosophy. Nothing superfluous, everything designed to serve the driving experience. Unlike some contemporary GTs that sacrificed ergonomics for style, the Strada offered a cockpit that felt natural, intuitive, and satisfying. Combined with the car's light curb weight, around 2,750 pounds, it produced a driving experience that was intense without becoming punishing, thrilling without becoming exhausting. In retrospect, the 1966 Bizzarrini 5300 GT Strada is a forgotten masterpiece, a car that could accelerate like a missile, corner like a thoroughbred, and yet remain relatively tame to maintain. Its rarity has cemented it as a collector's dream, but outside of dedicated enthusiasts, its name barely surfaces. For those who understand it, the 5300 GT Strada is more than a car. It is a testament to what happens when vision, engineering, and audacity collide. It's a reminder that history sometimes forgets the best cars, leaving them as hidden legends to be discovered decades later by those willing to look beyond the fame of Ferraris and Lamborghinis. If you want, I can expand this even further into a sweeping, almost novel-length account of the 5300 GT Strada, detailing every performance metric, owner anecdote, race history, and period review to create an ultra-detailed, immersive history of this rare Italian-American hybrid. Do you want me to do that?
The 1969 Chevrolet Corvette ZL1 is more than a car. It is an icon, a mechanical masterpiece born from the rare intersection of American muscle audacity and race-bred engineering. In the context of the late 1960s, when the streets of the United States were awash with Mustangs, Camaros, and Dodge Chargers vying for dominance, the ZL1 represented something far beyond typical muscle car theatrics. While most muscle cars of the era relied on sheer displacement and aggressive styling to make a statement, the ZL1 combined that raw power with a level of engineering sophistication almost unheard of in Detroit at the time. It was a Corvette designed to terrorize timing lights, to embarrass imported exotics, and to make mere mortals feel insignificant in its presence. At its heart lay the all-aluminum 427 cubic inch V8, a marvel of weight-saving ingenuity and brute force. Unlike the standard iron block 427s, which were already potent, the ZL1's aluminum construction reduced the engine's weight by nearly 200 pounds. This made the car remarkably balanced for its size, with a front end that no longer felt top-heavy despite the Corvette's long hood and muscular fenders. The engine was conservatively rated at 430 to 500 horsepower, depending on sources, though insiders often suspected it produced more in reality. It was the same engine that raced in NASCAR, a fact that alone should have terrified anyone unfortunate enough to line up against it at the drag strip. Unlike many muscle cars of the era, the ZL1's power was immediate, brutal, and utterly non-negotiable. One could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds, a figure that rivals modern supercars, and cover the quarter mile in low 12-second territory, leaving practically every domestic competitor in its dust. Ferrari 365 GTB Ford Daytonas, Lamborghini Miuras, and Maserati Ghiblis were all fair game. Cars that had dominated European roads could be humiliated by this American thunderbolt in straight-line sprints. Yet, the ZL1 was no one-trick pony. The reduced weight and careful chassis tuning meant that it was not merely a drag car. It could be driven hard in corners, and an experienced driver could extract astonishing performance from its suspension. The Corvette's chassis had been stiffened, the brakes and tires carefully selected to match the engine's explosive potential. Unlike the bloated personal luxury cars of Detroit or the overly soft sedans masquerading as sports cars, the ZL1 was razor sharp. It was raw, unforgiving, and exhilarating in equal measure. Owners would often recall the sheer terror and thrill of stepping into the car. The throttle demanded respect, the steering rewarded focus, and the engine's vibrations communicated the latent fury waiting to be unleashed. One test driver famously said, "You don't drive the ZL1, you survive it." Production numbers were another defining element of the ZL1's mystique. Chevrolet built only about 20 examples, each carrying an astronomical $4,700 engine option atop the Corvette's base price, a sum equivalent to a small suburban home at the time. Few could afford such a machine, and even fewer understood its potential. This scarcity, coupled with its race-bred provenance, made it rarer than most Ferraris of the same period, cementing its status as the holy grail for collectors and enthusiasts alike. Today, a ZL1 is not just a Corvette, it is a living artifact of American automotive daring, a symbol of what Detroit could achieve, if it wished, to compete with Maranello and Modena on both performance and drama, delivering a car that could dominate drag strips, intimidate European exotics, and still be driven legally on public roads. It is the ultimate expression of Corvette ambition in the late 1960s, aggressive, uncompromising, and nearly flawless in concept, if not always practical.
Collectors, historians, and enthusiasts treat it as a benchmark against which all other muscle cars are measured, a car whose legend is only magnified by its rarity and unrelenting performance. In short, the 1969 Chevrolet Corvette ZL1 is more than a car. It is a statement, a defiance of compromise, and a reminder that at least once, American automakers were willing to gamble everything for the sheer thrill of unadulterated speed. It is the pinnacle of the muscle era, the ultimate Corvette, and a machine whose mythos will never fade. To drive one, or simply witness one, is to understand what happens when engineering audacity meets automotive artistry. Pure, unrelenting, unforgettable power.